Armageddon is an internal war within the human psyche. Revelation chapter 16 and verse 16. So before we begin this study, I'll just have a little introductory reading from Revelation chapter 16. The sixth angel poured out his vial or bowl on the great river Euphrates, and its waters were dried up to prepare the way for the kings from the east. Then I saw three impure spirits that looked like frogs that came up out of the mouth of the dragon, out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. They are demonic spirits that perform signs, and they go out to the kings of the old world to gather them for the battle of the great day of God Almighty. Look, I come like a thief. Blessed is the one who stays awake and remains clothed, so as not to go naked and be shamefully exposed. Then they gathered the kings together to the place that in Hebrew is called Armageddon. Now the word Armageddon does not appear again in the Bible, so its meaning must be drawn from our own logical insight and our intuitive understanding. Armageddon is defined as the final battle between good and evil at the end of the world. The final battle is not an external battle, but rather a personal battle that we must win within ourselves. The book of Revelation is written in symbolic language. It has a spiritual understanding. See Revelation chapter 1 and verse 1, a revelation by Jesus Christ which God gave him to show his slaves the things that must shortly take place, and he sent forth his angel and presented it in signs through him to his slave John. First, we must understand what the war is. 2 Corinthians chapter 10 and verse 3. For though we walk in the flesh, we do not war after the flesh. The first letter of Peter chapter 2 and verse 11. Dear friends, I urge you as foreigners and exiles to abstain from sinful desires which wage war against your soul. Galatians chapter 2 and verse 20. I am crucified with Christ, nevertheless I live, yet not I, but Christ lives in me, and the life which I now live in the flesh I live by the faith of the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. 1 Peter chapter 4 and verse 1. Christ then, having suffered for us in the flesh, ye also with the same mind arm yourselves, because he who did suffer in the flesh is done with sin, so as to live the rest of the time in the flesh, no longer for human lusts, but for the will of God. 2 Corinthians chapter 10 and verse 4. For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds. The apostles explained the spiritual reality of Armageddon within the human psyche. For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds, casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ. Revelation chapter 16 and verse 14. The frog-like spirits of demons are error thoughts which are internal. This wisdom is not one from above coming down, but is earthly, born of the soul, demonical. James chapter 3 and verse 15, Rotherham's Emphasized Bible. So the gathering together of the final swarm of error thoughts in consciousness, which sometimes seems to be countless, to make war against the true and higher thoughts of the individual. If the higher thoughts are not true to their spiritual images, they are sometimes overcome by these errors, as is suggested by the metaphysical understanding of the kings of Judah who were slain at Megiddo. Yet it is really a most fortunate place, because it affords an excellent opportunity for the individual to obtain a great and sweeping victory over error or sin. Sisera and his host or army were defeated there, and thus to bring forth precious fruit. Armageddon first takes place within the human psyche. It is a madness that will capture the hearts and minds of believers. There are concepts that we have in our mind that the beast, the dragon, and the false prophet have perpetuated with man-made religions and the media that have brought about the weakening of our spiritual growth. The Battle of Armageddon is the conflict between truth and error in consciousness. Many people have not reached the point in their spiritual development where they are even ready for this great battle of Armageddon. If a person rejects the truth outright, he doesn't get to this point. Old beliefs don't die easily, especially the ones that are considered true in religion. Armageddon stands for that place within our consciousness where there is a struggle between our choice of following negative impulses or practicing truth thinking. The text says that the struggle is to occur of that great day of God Almighty. When is this to be? For the true believers, it is every day. The Battle of Armageddon doesn't have to be a 50 years war, but many drag it out even longer than that. As in many battles, there are intermittent periods that mislead us into thinking the battle is over. However, it isn't over until the new birth experience takes place, until the Messiah appears on Mount Zion, the place in consciousness where we realize our oneness with God. We realize that He is within us.